While we sleep, the guardians of the night take to the streets, having said goodbye to those they love. Each other knowing they may never say these words again, they face the evil that we run from. They dedicate their lives to those that would hate them because they wear the badge. They wear the badge not for the glory or recognition, but because they were born to honor the thin blue line. This is the LEO First Podcast. We'll talk to the men and women in law enforcement, those that have retired, and anyone who's impacted by law enforcement. We'll peel back the curtain, and you'll get the real stories. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Every law enforcement officer has a story to tell. Get ready to hear from the men and women who put their lives on the line every day for their communities and their country. Welcome to the LEO First Podcast. Now, here's your host, Michael Laidler.
Hey everybody, it's Michael Laidler, your host of the LEO First Podcast. And as I mentioned on Instagram and LinkedIn, this is going to be a special edition episode. Why? Because what's going on in our community and our society right now, just recently, we had an assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump, who's also running again. And I'm not going to get into the politics of everything that happened with there. I'm not really a political person, for and foremost, because I don't understand it. And I have too much other things going on to worry about that. But I wanted to get into the mental psyche of what happened with the response of the people that did the shooting and the Secret Service, because as I scrolled through social media, and I scrolled very, very lightly, I don't dig into people's comments, I saw different headlines that talked about what that Secret Service people, or they should have done, or what they would have did. And a lot of us have not pulled the trigger. In my 20 years of law enforcement, the most I've ever come into getting in a situation is having my finger or having my hand on the outside of the trigger guard. And trust me, guys, I am more than happy that that's the only thing I've ever had to do in my time. But today's guest, Michael Sugrue, he has been in one fatal shooting, as well as he's been in situations where he's had to almost pull the trigger. And I love to have people like him on because he's the reality. He is the real deal. He's not a theory-based person as far as what can happen out there. So today is, like I said, it's going to be a special edition. It's going to give Mike the opportunity to explain kind of like what really happens in the brain, not what a professor tells you or what social media tells you, what actually goes through. Because I want to highlight and show you guys that while we're being hard on these folks out there, Secret Service in particular, there's more than just what happens to what you see on TV. There's things that go on. Shooting flesh is a lot different than shooting a silhouette. And not understanding that makes it easy, I guess, to critique somebody until you get in that situation. So, Mike, I know we did our podcast back in July of last year. If anybody's looking for that one, if they want to get a whole idea of what Mike has going on, you can go to episode 19 of the LEO First Podcast. You can also see Mike on multiple platforms. Man, this dude, he has 40,000 followers on LinkedIn. He has Facebook. He has Instagram. He has multiple accounts. So if you're really trying to figure out what he has going on, look at his different accounts, guys. You won't be hard to find him. Trust me. He posts and he's good at it. He has a book called Relentless Courage. If you have not read it, which I have heard the audiobook, and how you hear his voice now is exactly how he sounds, which is pretty cool. Take a look, grab it, buy it. Also, leave a review if you do buy his book, because he's pouring his life into what he believes and what I believe as well is an important concept, and that's mental wellness in law enforcement. So, Mike, I know before we started the show, I brought up when you did have to have a fatal shooting, but before that happened, and you made a good point, the fact that you didn't shoot somebody early on in your career, which you got very close, also left an impact on you. So tell us, without walking us through the whole thing, because if people want to know the entire story, both of his shootings, go buy his book. Trust me, the way he wrote it, it gives you a detailed response. What we're looking for, and I really want people to understand, is the emotional side to the first attempted, I guess, or almost shooting you had. So tell us about that one.
Yeah, I just want to say, before that one even happened, as a law enforcement officer, I mean, I can literally count over 100 times where I've had to pull out my firearm and point it at somebody. And 99.9% of the time, people comply and they listen. And in many of those cases, my finger never even went to the actual trigger. Now, the incident that you're talking about, I was literally a millisecond from shooting this kid. And I call him a kid because he was a young teenager. I didn't know that at the time. But to make a long story short, I was in an undercover role. I was helping one of our detectives, and we were looking for a residential burglary suspect where they had taken actually a fully loaded laser-sighted revolver. And I was with my partner. We got split up and we were just doing reconnaissance because we were expecting this guy to show up hours later. Well, it turns out I actually found the car that he was hiding in, and I didn't realize it was him. And I didn't look anything like a police officer. I had a goatee, shaved head, big earrings, wearing Air Jordans. And I remember this kid popped up. And again, I didn't even know for sure that this was the suspect. I just knew that we had to talk to this guy. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he pops his head up, he opens the door. And I lift up my shirt to show my gun and badge so he doesn't think I'm robbing him or, trying to assault him. And he takes off running. And at that point, I start running after him. I pull out my gun. And literally, as I'm chasing him, he starts to pull out this laser-sighted revolver from his waistband. I mean, literally, I can see the gun coming out of his waistband. And all I know is this armed, dangerous guy is in this crowded parking garage, running towards the public. And I remember thinking, like, I'm going to have to shoot this guy. And I won't say the language here. I said some very foul language. And I said, basically, if you don't effing stop, I'm going to effing shoot you. Mm-hmm. And I call it by the grace of God, for some reason, this young man listened to me at that very moment, in that instant, when I was literally finger on the trigger, getting ready to pull it. He put his hands up in the air and dropped to the ground. And most people, when they're hearing this, they're thinking, well, like, what's the big deal? This kid, you didn't shoot him. He listened to you. He complied. But really, the gravity of that situation, it hit me almost immediately. I remember when my partner finally came up to me to help get him cuffed up, and we got him cuffed up. And as soon as we did, I just felt my body freaking collapse. Like, I literally felt my body weight collapse. I felt like I was going to pass out. And it was just this overwhelming physical, biological response. It was just this adrenaline dump where literally I'm fearing for my life. And I'm also fearing that I'm going to have to take somebody's life. And that incident, I will never, ever forget. And that happened back in like 2009, 2010. And I remember it now, 14 years later, just like it happened yesterday. And I remember when we cleared the scene finally, and I was in my boss's office. And again, I just collapsed. And I just had this overwhelming sense of emotion. I started tearing up. And all I could think about was, man, like, I could have killed this kid. And later I talked to him after we interviewed him, and I was like, man, what were you thinking? And this guy was actually, he was respectful. He was talking to me. He made a bad mistake. He made a bad decision, but he wasn't an evil person. He wasn't what I would call an inherently bad person. He just made a bad decision that day. And I remember talking to him thinking like, man, this is a good kid here, right? And I almost killed you. Like, do you realize this? And I remember just the look in his face, and I think it finally hit him, thinking like, man, I really could have died today.
And it's crazy how that is the reality of even though you didn't take his life that day, it's like you almost lost a part of yourself because you could have taken it. And people that's never been in those situations, it's hard to explain. I know being in multiple academies throughout my life, multiple training, whatever, it's active shooter, whatever. It's a lot different when it's real and you can actually like end someone's life right there and then. And obviously, given your military background and your law enforcement background up to that point, you could have easily shot and killed him easily. And then everything else that comes with it, which we all know, anybody that's worn a uniform or been around anybody, we know how many more things happen in life. It ain't like you just have a shooting and you're back to work the next day. You go through a multitude of things, which we can talk about in a second, that could have happened that day. But the physical side, the emotional side is hard. Did you see it coming? Like that side of it?
No, I mean, honestly, at that time, I was undercover on a California State Drug Task Force, and we were literally doing multiple high-risk entries almost every single day.
Mhm.
What I mean by that is basically like what a SWAT team would do. We're all geared up. We have ARs out, handguns out. We're blowing open doors on search warrants, parole searches, probation searches, going through people's houses, gun out, pointed at them, ordering them to the ground. And I felt invincible. I mean, I literally felt invincible, untouchable. And like I said, thank God in all those circumstances, people listened, they complied, they stopped right away. I mean, as soon as they saw my gun pointed at them, they froze, whereas this kid is literally sees my gun, he's running for me, and he's pulling out the gun from his waistband. And again, we don't know his motivation, right? I mean, he could have been pulling the gun out just to throw it away because he doesn't want to be associated with the gun, or he doesn't want to be holding the gun and get shot. And he doesn't realize there's that in between time where, hey, if you're pulling it out, in my mind, I'm thinking you're going to shoot somebody in the parking lot or you're going to shoot me. I don't know that you may be trying to toss it away from you, to get rid of evidence or distance yourself from the handgun. And oftentimes we only have split seconds literally to make a life or death decision. I mean, literally, that's how fast it can happen. And people don't realize the reaction versus action. They don't realize how fast things can happen. And if somebody has the upper hand on you, like this kid, if he's already got the gun out, odds are he's going to get a shot off before I do.
Man, I've had situations where I've seen people running or ditching guns, and I've always been very happy when I saw them throw it versus turn around and point at me. I've never had up to this point in my life, especially on duty. I don't think, hopefully not off duty either, but especially off duty or especially on duty. I've never had anybody point a gun at me. I can't remember. I want to say off duty is the same thing, Mike, but I don't want to lie. I'm pretty sure I haven't been in any of those situations, but I've for sure know on duty. So all the times I've been in those situations, you're right. Like anything you say, all right, police gun or drop your weapon. They see whatever they see, whether it's the badge, the uniform, whatever gear, they usually just drop it. But like you said, in your case, it was complete opposite. Whatever was going on in his mind, obviously you're not a mind reader. You just know that, hey, he has a gun. He can either throw it or he can shoot me. It's kind of that's the only two options you kind of have in that moment. But you're right. That split second decision I talked about on a podcast back years ago is I call it the 0.25 decision, where you literally have a quarter of a second to make a decision on everything you see. So you literally a quarter second, and people are like, how fast? I said, you time it, guys. It's faster than I talk. So you have to quickly make a decision. In that case, you made a decision that worked out. Thank goodness you didn't have to take his life, and you were able to go home safely. He was able to go home safely. You did have those emotional effects, but thank goodness you didn't have to do that. Now, you had a situation which I know has been probably one of the bigger factors in your life because it has impacted you at all levels, not just work. And that was the fatal shooting you were involved in. So tell us the emotions that go with an actual shooting when you actually pull the trigger and take someone else's life.
It's really hard to describe, and I'll first say it's a huge mix of feelings and emotions. In my case, I immediately felt like I was in shock, like this wasn't real. It was almost like time stopped and everything just froze, and I literally couldn't believe that there was somebody dead right in front of me. I mean, literally just a few feet from me. I mean, blood gushing. I mean, just horrific wounds. And it's there's this sense of relief that you're still alive, but then there's the shock that this really just happened. Because what I think most people don't understand is that 99.9% of all law enforcement officers will never shoot anybody in their entire career. I mean, that is a fact. Now, the public won't think that or believe that because if you watch the news, you watch TV shows, the media, you would think that police officers are getting in shootings every single day. And if you average it out, yeah, there is a police officer somewhere in the US getting in a shooting. But as far as at the individual level, most officers never have to shoot somebody. And so this is something that we train for, we prepare for, we talk about it, we expect it, we say we're ready for it. But the reality is, fortunately, and I say fortunately and luckily for most people, it never is a reality. And for me, unfortunately, it is a reality. And I don't wish this upon anybody. In my case, my shooting was completely justified. We saved a couple that a guy with a butcher knife was trying to kill, and then try to kill myself and my fellow officers. But that's not the point here. The point is that I took a human life, and I have to live with that forever. And this shooting happened at the very end of 2012, December 27th, 2012. And it still affects me today, and I know it will affect me for the rest of my life. Now, when I talk about this kind of wave of emotions, at the scene, it's that shock. And then it's like, you got to pull your head out of your ass and get back in the game because, there's no one coming right away. Like, you're it. And in my case, I had every officer in the city on scene. I was the only supervisor on duty. And it was going to be some time before relief could come or people could come over and take over that crime scene. So I had to get back in the game and get back operational. And so for that moment, I was able to push those emotions and feelings aside and start doing work, start directing people to check, the neighbors, because there's connected condominiums on both sides, to set up crime scene tape, to secure evidence, like to do the things that have to happen. And so I think the real flood of emotions came later when I finally leave the scene and I got taken back to the police department. And after a series of different events, I got in a room by myself. I remember just sitting there, just thinking, like, what the heck just happened? And I had said, but it was, man, like brand new agent, this here. It hasn't happened the entire time you've been with this agency. Like, you guys saved lives. You saved your own life. And part of me was pumped up. Like, part of me was like, fuck yeah, man. Like, I'm alive. Like, this shitbag is dead, right? But I didn't know the whole backstory. I didn't know who this guy was. I didn't know why this incident happened. And so that's another factor when later on I learned about who this guy was and that he wasn't a hardened criminal, that he wasn't a dirtbag, that something happened that night. We don't know what. We don't know if it was a psychotic break, if it was drug-induced psychosis. But up until that moment, this was a good young man who was well-liked, was respected, he was loved. And again, I have to live with the fact that a parent lost their son, an identical twin brother lost his brother, and these are the things that I don't think most people think about or realize. And I also remember too that, I'm just going to push these feelings away. I'm going to push this away. This isn't going to bother me. I didn't know this person. I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to go on with my life. Things are going to be good. And that worked for a little bit, but meanwhile, I'm isolating at work. I'm isolating off duty. I'm isolating with my family. I'm starting to have constant nightmares, this face, this image. I just can't get it out of my dreams. I'm starting to drink too much. My personal life is literally starting to fall apart. But when I'm at work, I'm operational. Like I said, when we're operational, we're good to go. Mm-hmm. We're getting the job done. But it's in that downtime, I think, when it affects us most.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm happy you touched on both of those stories and you really highlighted everything you even have to do after you do pull the trigger. Like sometimes like people, and I've kind of been in that boat too before I started to pay attention to what people like you have going on or have had happen to them. It's like you shoot, okay, you're back 10-8 again. No, your mind has to process things. But there's, like you said, you were the only supervisor on scene, so you still had to maintain your composure. It wasn't like you were a line officer who was in the shooting and then the supervisor said, okay, give me your gun or whatever, go, you've been relieved. No, you're still in charge. So even at your level, you were still held to even a higher standard than the average officer that didn't have any leadership ranks. So the fact that you were able to get through it was extremely important. Obviously, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That I think it's good for them to hear that it's just not an easy turnover or turnaround when things happen. So when you saw like the story over the weekend with the attempted assassination on Trump and stuff like that, and obviously flashbacks happen. That's something else people have to realize is that if you went through anything similar, it's gonna creep back in your mind. That's just how your brain works. Like, what were some of your thoughts, not based on the political side, but particularly in the realm of the actual taking of another life from the Secret Service office, speaking from the law enforcement standpoint?
Well, I have to tell you, the thing that got me the most was, and I saw it on social media. I don't remember where, but it was in my feed, and it was a picture of the shooter with just blood coming out of his head. He was dead. In this picture, there's nobody around him, so it looked like it was taken from a distance. But that immediately brought me right back to my shooting, and I literally imagined like that person, literally just a couple feet from me, obviously dead. In this picture, this guy was obviously dead. And I started thinking like, some people are saying, well, that's the end of it, right? The threat is neutralized. And for me, I remember thinking, no, this is just the beginning. And it's just the beginning for a lot of people, not just the shooter. But in this case, and I don't know all the details, but from what I've seen, it looked like there was two snipers that were on that roof that were side by side. And I don't know if one was acting as a spotter and one was acting as a sniper, but it looked to me like they're both snipers. They both had long rifles. And I started thinking, like, in my shooting, there was 3 other officers involved in it. And we had 2 separate volleys of shots. In the first volley of shots, there was 2 other officers that fired their service weapons, but neither one of them hit the suspect. And in the second volley of shots, there was 1 other officer with me, and we both hit him. And so what people also don't realize is that that person that didn't shoot, they're going to start blaming themselves. They're going to have guilt. They're going to think like, why did I hesitate? Or why didn't I pull the trigger? Why didn't I pull the trigger sooner? And I immediately start thinking about the poor firefighter, the one that was killed in the stands. They've been showing pictures of him online with his family.
That's tough.
And horrific. And thinking about that, and that's where this guilt comes in of the people that were there. You have magical thinking. Like sometimes officers, in shootings, the ones that don't shoot are just as affected, if not more affected, than the ones that do shoot. And this is another issue because when it comes to police departments, when it comes to agencies, people want to wrap their arms around the shooter, but they forget about everybody else involved in that situation and what their role was. And we also need to understand that everyone sees and hears things differently. There's extreme hyper-focused vision. There's selective hearing. Like in my shooting, I didn't realize that in the second volley of shots, it was a different person. I thought it was the same person, both volleys of shots. I had no idea because I was so super focused on the threat. And that's what I don't think people realize. And so, I'm not here to critique anybody in the Secret Service or what they did because simply I don't know all the facts. I don't know all the details. But I can also tell you that these shootings affect everybody differently. Mm-hmm. I've met officers who have been involved in shootings and they seem fine. And I'm not just talking about right after, I'm talking about years later. They seem like they're okay with it. And that's, I think, because every shooting has different circumstances. The suspect has different circumstances. But, even learning about this suspect, right? We're learning that this was some loner, some bullied kid. He probably had an extremely rough time as a teenager, probably got picked on, beat up, who knows? And I'm not justifying anything that he did. But again, that sniper that took his life, he's going to have to get to know who this kid was. Mm-hmm. He's going to have to get to know how did it affect his family? Who are his parents? There's always more to this story. And so that's what I think the public doesn't realize is they think that an officer just shoots, that's it. We pack up our stuff, we go on to our next mission, or in this case, the Secret Service agent packs up his rifle and goes off to his next assignment protecting, some president or vice president or whoever. And that's not the case. It's not the case at all. I can guarantee you that that incident will change the lives of countless people.
Yeah, you're right. And before, one of the things we talked about before is that the Secret Service training isn't just like no run of the mill training. It's not like they're like, hey, you look like you could shoot. No, for you want to just be a regular Secret Service agent, you're going through a lot of training. But then on the next level of being a sniper for the presidential detail, there's things that you had to go through, at least on paper. You know what I mean, Mike? So when you finally get to do the action side, which is the reality of what we talk about, it's a whole other category. So I have one final question for you as it relates to the shooting. If we wanted to create a level of empathy for the law enforcement officers that were involved, like what are some things that you can suggest that people can do, whether they're in our industry or even outside of our industry, to help keep these people like in their prayers or in their mind that, there's still people outside of the uniform?
I think really, showing support for your local police department, for your local agency. What matters most is your community, right? And the relationship that you have with the police officers that are serving and protecting you, that are literally putting their lives on the line every single day, knowing they may not come home. Here in my community, we actually lost somebody last week on Friday. This motorcycle officer, I'd met him, only 32 years old, married, two young boys, and he was doing a traffic stop. He was protecting the public. He was doing a traffic stop on his motorcycle for somebody that was either speeding or ran a red light or something like that. And while he was doing that, somebody who was on drugs, who has 2 previous DUIs, was passing cars on the shoulder and hit this officer at 65 miles per hour, killing him instantly. So this husband, this father who was only 32 years old, will never see his family again. He'll never see his kids graduate high school. He'll never see his boys get married. I mean, you think about this impact and this ripple impact on that officer's family, friends, and loved ones. And this is just my community that happened just a couple days ago. But we have officers that are literally getting killed almost every single day across this country. And like I said, they're willing to put their lives on the line for complete strangers. And I think what's most important is to get to know them, to understand that they're human just like you, that we have feelings, we have emotions, we have families, we have loved ones, we have all the same issues and problems that you're going through, but yet we still step out the door every single day willing to do what most won't, and that's run towards danger when people are running away from it.
And it does take a special type of craziness to do that. I think we all can agree on that. So run towards gunfire. We all have done it. Well, at least most of us in the law. If you have, let's say, I'm gonna throw a number. If you have at least 5 years in your career, you probably ran towards some gunfire or some high stress incident or situation that most people would have like, we're gonna go the other way. But in uniform, especially, we just have kind of like that innate mindset, like, what, we're going to protect and serve. Like, it's not just a catchphrase, it's like a legit thing. So Mike, like I said, I love that you were able to come on 2 or 3 days after this incident. I know I also promised you that I wouldn't take a lot of your time, but I really wanted people to hear from someone that actually has been involved in a fatal incident. Like, I think it's important that we don't have a lot of theorists or a lot of people that think they know what happened to someone emotionally during a shooting or after, because like you said, we're all real and we're all humans. Like putting on a uniform is optional, but being a person is still being a person. So the fact that you were able to share that with us, I know my audience will enjoy it. And once again, guys, if you're looking for Michael Sugrue, you can find him on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I don't know if you do anything on X. I really don't do much on X myself, but if not, you guys reach out to him. Also, grab a copy of Relentless Courage. You can find it on Amazon. You can find the print version, or you can do the Audible. And once you read it, guys, please leave a review. I want to say, Mike, what do you have, about 600 reviews now, if not more?
715 total, but we're 3 away from 600 on Amazon. So yeah, it's getting up there.
Yeah, guys. So you guys know, obviously, what he's doing is important. He loves what he does. He's based out of California. So if there's any training coordinators or associations looking to speak, the book Michael, he's right there. Obviously, he travels everywhere. We actually met in person in Virginia last year. So I can tell you that what we're doing is real. And for you guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have enjoyed what you heard, make sure you share it with somebody. You repost it, you share it, because this is real stuff, guys. This isn't a theorist talking. This is reality. And this is what we want you to know, like, what happened a few days ago from the law enforcement element isn't normal. And these people that were involved at all levels, whether it's family, politicians, there's still people too, and law enforcement, you still have to have an empathetic side to what they went through, because that is a life-changing event for everyone involved. So, guys, thank you for the time. Mike, thank you for the time as well. Hope you guys enjoy this. If you guys need anything else, please reach out. Y'all have a great day.
You've been listening to the LEO First Podcast. Michael has been in law enforcement since 2005. He's worked for 3 law enforcement agencies in 3 different states. He's a professional speaker who travels the country teaching about leadership development and self-awareness. And he's the author of a book called Greatness Beyond the Badge: The 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. It's Michael's passion to bring law enforcement members' stories to the front, so you get the real and raw take. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Michael on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Michael Laidler, on Twitter at Michael A. Laidler, on Facebook at Michael Laidler Leadership. Send an email to michael@michaellaidler.com and hit the website at michaellaidler.com. See you next time on the LEO First Podcast.